Bank robber dresses as Santa has terrible experience. What? What is this?
If you wanted to rob a bank during Christmas, you might think dressing as Santa Claus would be a good disguise.
No. No, I wouldn't actually.
Seeing as you won't look all that out of place and your identity is still concealed.
How many people dress as Santa that you don't look out of place?
You wouldn't be the first person to think this, dressing as Santa for Christmas not being among the most original of ideas, but one bank robber has actually followed through with the scheme, resulting in one of the largest and most spectacular bank
React
heists
to this?
in the history.
Is that a clip of my own? That better not be a clip of my own stream. Oh, no, it's 12 hours of fireplace.
Of the American Southwest. Sounds promising so far, but unfortunately, this robbery also illustrated why the Santa disguise is probably a bad idea, as the robber's get-up created more problems than it solved, until the whole thing snowballed into a massive disaster for everyone involved. Miriam Ferguson was the governor of Texas from 1925 to 1927, and again for a second term from 1933 to 1935.
What a legend.
During her time in office, she controversially pardoned nearly 4,000 convicted criminals.
Wow.
One of these criminals was Marshall Ratliff from Cisco, Texas, who was freed from an 18-year...
Is... Okay, it's just a place called Cisco. Wait, was like the Cisco company started in Cisco? Because it's in California now. Or is this like just... Is it just a coincidence? It was founded by... It's Stanford. Okay. No, I think it's just a coincidence.
prison sentence in 1927 after serving just 2 years. Ratliff had been in prison for robbing a bank, but now that he had miraculously got back 16 years of his life as a free man, he decided that he should immediately rob another bank.
What a legend.
He wasn't exactly a genius, so he'll probably make an absolute dog's
Yeah, if you're a bank robber, you're not exactly the smartest person, right? Like, if you want to get some easy money, there are easier things to rob than a bank. Like, a gas station. Like, yeah, like, if you succeed in robbing the bank, you get a lot of money. But, like, the challenge of robbing a bank is considerably higher.
Of this. He tried to enlist his brother Lee to aid in a robbery of the First National Bank in their hometown of Cisco. Lee had also been recently pardoned by the governor, but
bank
he was
is where money
to
is,
help his
true.
brother, however, as he got himself arrested again. Einstein and Oppenheimer over here. Instead, Ratliff called in 2 fellow ex-cons and perpetual members of the naughty list, Henry Helms and Robert Hill, as well as a third man who was good with safes.
Plus the credit from doing a bank, that's true.
Chances of making off with a load of money were prematurely dashed when he came down with the flu and abandoned the scheme, making him probably the world's least committed bank robber. To replace the sneak thief sniffler, Helms called in a relative, Lewis Davis. Unlike the others, Davis was a family man with no criminal history, but he was in need of money and was lured into the plan with promises of big money and an easy job. This would turn out to be false. The heist was planned for the 23rd of December 1927. At the time, 3 to 4 Texas banks were being robbed every day, and in response...
Okay, maybe robbing a bank was a better plan in 1927. Holy shit! He said 3 to 4 being robbed every day, but how successful are those robberies? Are they attempted robberies or actual, like, I got away with money robberies? Because those are 2 very different things.
Texas Bankers Association offered $5,000, about $85,000 in today's money, to anyone who killed a bank robber.
Wait, they're just like, fuck it, we're not gonna pay for security. We're just gonna hire Texans. Actually so fucking based. Holy shit. So they would have just had guys standing outside the store, just pointing guns at everyone that came in. Holy shit.
There's no such reward for bringing them in alive, because Texas. This would make the bank robbery particularly risky, and given everyone in Cisco would recognize Ratliff, he decided to make use of a disguise. Seeing as it was Christmas, why not dress as Santa? People might keep their hands over their holsters if they saw a convicted bank robber walking into a bank, but no one would suspect Santa Claus of any impropriety. Arriving in a stolen car, Ratliff had the others drop him off a few blocks away from the bank so he could get things started while they parked the car in the alley beside the bank. As he made his way down the street, Ratliff noticed everyone was happy to see Santa so close to Christmas. A bit too happy, actually. Kids started to swarm over to him, and soon a small crowd was following him to the bank. To avoid suspicion, Ratliff was forced to speak in character to humour the children. Eventually, he was able to disperse the crowd before entering the bank. The bank
and you have all of these witnesses.
Pleasantly surprised to see Father Christmas and greeted Ratliff with a "Hello, Santa." Ratliff didn't respond, however, not because he was preparing for the heist, but because he was distracted. Several children had seen Santa in the bank and were coming in for a closer look. Just then, the rest of the gang arrived and everyone pulled out pistols. This is a ho-ho hold-up. A couple of civilians...
I hope he actually said that.
...managed to back out the door and go get help. The rest were corralled by the gang as Ratliff pulled a sack from under his costume and began stuffing it with cash and...
So there were like hundreds of witnesses outside who could immediately go and just get some of the Texans with guns. This is such a terrible fucking idea.
Bonds. Seeing as the police department was only 1 block away,
Jesus Christ, this... Okay, these guys are fucking bright.
Veteran Police Chief G.E. Bedford was very quickly on the scene, accompanied by 2 officers. Armed civilians also started to gather around the bank, eager for a chance of bagging a bank robber and the $5,000 reward. The gang traded fire with the mob outside, but soon realized they were surrounded. Taking 8 people inside the bank as hostages, including 2 little girls, they decided to enter the alleyway and make their way to the car using the hostages as human shields. As they left the bank, they were confronted by the mob. Look, they're taking...
And they shot the hostages, because Texas.
...cover behind children. No match at all for the penetrative power of my rifle. The mob opened fire on the gang.
Didn't shoot at the... No, you didn't shoot at when they had the hostages. No, that's not a thing that happened.
And all hell broke loose. A few moments later, the gang were making their getaway. They had the 2 little girls with them. All the other hostages had fled when the gunfire erupted. Some had been wounded. Police Chief Bedford and one of his deputies had been shot and would later die of their injuries. Some members of the mob had been shot too, leaving a total of 6 civilians wounded. The rest of the mob was in hot pursuit of the gang, who hadn't gotten away unscathed themselves. Ratliff had been wounded, although his injuries paled in comparison to family members.
Well, at least they were hidden because of the red.
And Davis, who was drifting in and out of consciousness. The good news was that they had stolen $12,400 in cash and $150,000 in bonds, making it the largest bank heist in Texas history.
What, that would be like at least probably close to $1 million now, wouldn't it? You're like 700,000?
But there was further bad news. Their car was running out of gas.
Jeez.
I knew we should have brought the magic sleigh. At the edge of town, a family...
You didn't buy fuel before you robbed the bank!
He was driving in the opposite direction when they were waved down by a frantic Santa Claus. Of course, they stopped to help Santa, but that's when the gang chased them away and commandeered their car. With the mob not far behind them, they hurriedly transferred the girls, the money, and an unconscious Davis from one car to the other. Robert Hill was injured as he tried to keep the mob at distance with
Rudolph the
gunfire.
getaway
Then
driver.
they noticed the driver had run off with the keys. They then had to put everything back in the original car.
This is the worst bank robbery I've ever
With even
seen.
less time now. With the mob catching up and Davis unresponsive, they decided to leave him in the back of the
It's
family's
fine, he's
car.
dead.
When the mob reached the scene, they were delayed by the discovery of Davis. Here was one of the members of the gang that just committed the largest bank heist in Texas.
Well, he's dead. That means they can get some money from it.
Or at least it would have
Just
been.
shoot him in the head.
Because in all the confusion, the gang had left the money in the car with him.
Oh my god. Oh my. What do you mean?
Lewis Davis died later that night. The gang, now with some extra breathing room, took the car off-road, smashing through cacti and scrub until eventually the overgrowth proved too dense for the car and they were forced to abandon it. Leaving the two girls, they continued on foot. They had lost the mob as night was setting in, beginning a massive manhunt the next day. The three men remained on the run for the entirety of Christmas Eve. On Christmas Day, they commandeered another car, taking its young driver, Carl Wiley, hostage and forcing him to drive. As they pulled off, Wiley's father tried to stop the car by shooting it with a shotgun. He hit his son in the arm.
What do you mean? Oh my god. Oh my fucking god.
Everyone in this story should get some sort of award. After another night on the run, the men released the injured Wiley and his car and set off to steal another one. When the authorities reached Wiley, he informed them that the gang was in rough shape. They were injured, had very little to eat over the last few days, and were struggling in the December weather. The next day, the robbers were spotted in a car.
It's
and
Texas,
chased.
not that bad.
Driving to an oil field, they exited the car and fired on their pursuers as they fled on foot. One of these pursuers was Deputy Sheriff Cy Bradford, a known badass who would later become a Texas Ranger.
Whoa,
Bradford took aim with
okay.
his double-barrel shotgun he called Old Betsy. He fired a shot and a fugitive
The most Texas thing ever.
went down. He fired another
Sounds like
shot.
a mission from GTA. It does sound like a GTA mission.
And another fugitive went down, but made it back to his feet to stagger on. A third shot landed on a third fugitive, who also managed to recover and keep going. These two robbers then disappeared into nearby woods. The authorities then made their way to the man who did not get back up. It turned out it wasn't a man at all, but Santa Claus. Well, I suppose Santa Claus is a man, but my point is that it was Marshall Ratliff. He reportedly had 6 pistols on his person, as well as 6 gunshot wounds.
Jesus.
But he was alive. The manhunt for Henry Helms and Robert Hill pressed on as a posse of over 100 men attempted to keep the pressure on the fugitives and deny them a chance to rest. A biplane was used in the search, but no one could find the men. During the search, 2 members of the posse were wounded due to accidental discharge of their weapons, bringing the total number of civilians wounded
They shot themselves.
to 9. Like I said, awards were needed. On the 30th of December, 7 days after the robbery, Henry Helms and Robert Hill were apprehended. Exhausted and weakened, the men did not put up a fight. This robbery had been a huge disaster, but things weren't about to get better for the men anytime soon. At trial, Robert Hill was sentenced to 99 years imprisonment for his part in the robbery. Over the next couple of years, he was involved in 3 prison breaks and spent over a year on the lam, but was ultimately recaptured each time. Hill then stopped attempting any more escapes for the next 15 years, when in 1945, he was granted a pardon by Governor Coke Stevenson.
What?
Jeez, Texas, what's with all these pardons?
Why?
Texas doesn't have an answer for this question because the Board of Pardons and Paroles kept no record of why they advised the governor to pardon Hill. After his release, Hill found employment, got married, bought a house,
and robbed a bank,
a church, and spent the next 50 years living the life of a model citizen. He died in 1990.
Okay, this guy won.
96. This is the good ending. Marshall Ratliff and Henry Helms both received the death sentence. On death row, Ratliff's mother gave him a phonograph and a stack of gospel records. He used this to play When the Roll is Called Up Yonder to men passing his cell on the way to the electric chair, presumably to add levity to their situation.
Oh my
In
God.
total, 7 men would hear this song on their way to die. Henry Helms attempted
Oh
to
my
feign
God.
insanity to avoid the chair. It
That's
took
the
10
strat.
minutes for a jury to see through this and confirm his place on the hot seat. On September 6, 1929, almost 2 years after the robbery, Helms passed by Ratliff's cell. Ratliff did not play any music as his brother-in-arms walked to his death. That same day, Ratliff also began to feign insanity. It seems Ratliff's attempts were more convincing because he had his jailers feeding him, bathing him, and taking him to the toilets. A month later, and the guards had obviously stopped viewing Ratliff as a potential threat because his cell door was left unlocked. Sneaking out, he got a hold of a 6-shooter and fatally wounded a guard before another guard attempted to wrestle the gun off of him. In the ensuing scuffle, the guard beat Ratliff unconscious and dragged him back to his cell. The next day, a crowd of around 1,000 people gathered outside the jail. Already annoyed Ratliff had gone so long without execution, they had heard of his insanity ploy and his escape attempt and decided they'd had enough.
Hey, they
Some
go
of the
killing
men
himself?
broke into the jail and made their way to Ratliff's cell.
Oh my
Hello,
God.
Santa. Marshall Ratliff was dragged outside where the crowd hung him between 2 telephone poles.
Jesus Christ! Okay. Okay, sure.
A grand jury was formed to investigate this act of vigilantism, but no one was ever tried. Reportedly, as his body was
Wow.
placed in the hearse, a Santa Claus leading a Christmas parade passed by. Bank heists always make for interesting stories.
Oh,
Thankfully,
Texas was
this is
metal
not
as
the
fuck.
first one I've done, so if you
Yeah,
like it, you can
apparently.
watch some more. I have hundreds of other less bank heisty but equally interesting videos too, and I make one every week, so you can subscribe to see more in the future. You can also see videos from me by following my Facebook, my Instagram,
Wow, your Facebook.
and my TikTok. So until next time, have a very merry and non-bank robbing Christmas, and stay safe.
What the actual fuck? Yeah, thank you for that. That was... Yeah. That was something. That... Jesus Christ.